It's Mike Unleashed on the BetRivers Network.
All right, it is now time for Mike Unleashed. A couple unusual topics we have for Mike Unleashed today, and I will touch on Lenny Dykstra in a second. But let's start out with the Jonathan Feliciano, Jalen Carter snafu. The guard for the San Francisco 49ers apparently crossed the line with Jalen Carter when he taunted him by bringing up the accident that where a lot of people lost their lives, the drag racing situation that Jalen Carter got involved in when he was at the University of Georgia. I don't know what Carter said to Feliciano. I wasn't on the line. I don't know what the whole story is. I will say there's some things that you go over the line. I understand these guys try to get in each other's under each other's skin, but that's the way. People died. That's not anything that you bring up to somebody. So Feliciano did that. He's a crumb, and he should get all kinds of negative feedback for him doing that. Darren, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. So Feliciano apparently had made comments during the game about the death, with the accident, Carter's teammate that passed away in the drag racing accident. Now, it seems like Carter kind of took it a step higher because he had mentioned something about, I'm going to murder you, you're going to be a body, and your kids are not going to have a father. But what made it worse is apparently Jalen Carter had started posting pictures of Feliciano's family, his wife and kids, on social media. And first of all, you're right. The lines were crossed by both players. But if that's true, and Carter really was like, dude, if somebody posted pictures of my kids, I'm going to jail because this guy's going to be in the woods with a shovel and a bag of lye.
Yeah, Jalen Carter's got Jalen Carter needs to grow up, and of course, he's had some issues in the past that have been brought to light. Not the least of which, the most recent one was the Target store where he tried to slide some things at a Target.
That, by the way, that's why he dropped.
He's got, and they were worried about his behavior. They were worried. That's why he dropped, and they were worried about his behavior. So, he's got somebody's got to counsel him, some veteran. I don't know what's going to happen with Fletcher Cox or
he's the best guy for the job, and he might not be
Brandon Graham, but those two guys that need to be responsible if they're back with the Eagles of getting this guy in tow. All right, the CNN had Pat Mahomes on in an interview, and I believe it was Abby Phillips. This has got you fired up here. And she asked Patrick Mahomes about the reaction that the Super Bowl win for the Chiefs was rigged to benefit Joe Biden. A lot of people were saying that. So she brought it up to get his reaction to it. Now, you didn't like the question. So I'll try to explain why she would ask a question like that. But go tell me why you were bothered by
it's
that.
It's a waste of a question, okay? First of all, what is she expecting him to say? If she wants to make a footnote comment or embarrassing, we know all about that. But, were there any real distractions to you out there on the field? Something like that would have been fun. But for her to really, it was like a 35-second question, too. Like, you got this guy, you got the Super Bowl MVP for 90 seconds, 2.5 minutes, and you're wasting a fifth of it on this stupid question?
Well, dude, first of all, she doesn't care if it's a Super Bowl MVP. She's not a sports reporter. She's a news reporter, so she doesn't care about the sport part of it. She cares about the issue. The issue for whether you agree with it or not became some kind of a national issue because of the salacious media world we live in. So it's a current issue, by the way. So she cannot ignore it. Now, I know she's not going to get a great answer, but it's more that she has to ask the question than what the answer is going to be. This is CNN, remember. And so it becomes a talking point because CNN versus Fox. So it's out there already as a current issue. You have to ask the question whether it comes off as ridiculous or not. And the other thing, the other payoff of it is if that maybe Mahomes, the question is put out there to slam right wingers, right? Because they're the ones that are putting out the theory. So maybe Mahomes slams right wingers, in which case CNN now has a soundbite with the Super Bowl MVP. So that's the payoff for somebody like CNN. So you got to put things in perspective. A, it's a current issue because of the salacious media stuff that's going on between the parties. And B, maybe he will say something. You can't look at it like it's JB interviewing Patrick Mahomes. It's Abby Phillips of CNN.
Also, she didn't really take it seriously when she asked. She was kind of laughing her way through it. Like I think even she knows it's ridiculous.
Because it's preposterous. But you have to ask the question, and that's exactly the way you have to ask it. By kind of making it preposterous, you can't be like Walter Cronkite and ask that question. You kind of have to ask it because you didn't invent it. It became an issue. It's an issue. It's out there. It's floating out in space. And if you don't ask it, people will go, well, how come you didn't ask about that? You have to ask the question.
I definitely see your point, but I did when we first talked about this, I did preface what I was saying to you and my thoughts on it by saying, these are the reasons the media is getting slammed so much these days, because this is the direction of the media, and that bothers me. It really does. Anyway, you're probably right.
You can't let stuff like that bother you. It's the state of what we live in. All right. Yeah, you can't reinvent the wheel here. It is what it is. It's a runaway train, and so you just understand why something like that would happen, because it'll save you a lot of aggravation. Man, you get worried about little things like that, you're not going to live till you're 62.
Well, my wife jokes around with me all the time. I can handle like high-level crisis things easily. Like it's nothing. But like if I can't find the goddamn remote control, like the house starts rumbling, and I want to burn.
Yeah, you react for stupid little things. All right, let's move on to our next one. The Good Samaritan at the parade who tackled the gunman. I started to think what I would do in that situation, and I would have done the same thing. Here's the thing about me: I don't have any fears, which is that's not a good thing, by the way. I don't have any fears. Now, I always have this situation in my head where if I go into a donut shop and somebody's holding up the donut shop, I always think about me tackling the guy. I really do. It goes through my head all the time. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little story. I got robbed at gunpoint at a gas station on Broad and South one night. A guy came up to me and he wanted to ride somewhere as I'm pumping my gas. And I go, no, man, I can't give you a ride. He goes, yeah, well, and he had a brown paper bag. And he goes, yeah, well, I can just take it. And he has this gun that slides out of the bag. It's a little revolver. Now, my first thought was not to be scared. My first thought, believe it or not, and this is like I'm demented because I had this thought. My first thought that I was going to be a superhero. Here's what went through my head at the time. I had a cigarette lighter in my pocket. I thought, it actually crossed my mind that if I pull this gas thing out and light it and shoot the gas at him, like
in Point Break,
like napalm, like Point Break.
Yeah,
that's what crossed my mind. So I don't have any fear. That guy who tackled that guy has the same thing. He saw an area where the guy couldn't see him, and he could tackle him from behind. And I would have done the same thing. And I'm curious to know whether you would have.
I think if he's look, you have to have a cool head when someone has a weapon. You kind of have to have a cooler head there. You got to kind of take a breath.
See, I don't think
it's only money. It's only a car. It's not.
I don't think it wouldn't cross my mind, even though it's a distinct possibility that I would get shot. If I had an angle to tackle a guy where he didn't know it, I would definitely do it. And that Good Samaritan did that.
All you need is to hit the lighter and it doesn't go off or it sparks. Was it like a Bic lighter or was it a Zippo?
It was a cigarette lighter.
Yeah.
So I was going to, my point is, it didn't happen and I probably could have never pulled it off.
Yeah.
My point was, that was my first thought. Not, I'm going to just give up my car because he scared me.
As far as
so what I'm saying is my mentality would be to do with the same thing. Now, here's the other caveat to
you
this
were
story.
alone, right? Were you solo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm only saying that because that determines too. Like if I have my kids with me, I'm trying cooler heads. It makes a big difference if you're by yourself or if you have like.
Well, you have a cooler head than I do. I don't have a cool head.
I know you don't.
It's so I have learned to live with it. All right. So now, so here's the thing: they get the guy down. He's got a gun. The wife grabs the gun and pulls it away from the culprit, and she leaves it on the ground. And I'm going, my God, that gun is just laying out there where anybody, like maybe one of his buddies like grabs the gun. I'm like, what would you do with that gun?
Hold on, you're
Because
talking
if
about
you hold it in your hands and the police are rushing to the scene, they think that you're one of the shooters. Like, what would you do with the gun? Think about that situation.
yeah. That's so I didn't realize that. You're talking about at the parade. The guy had his wife with him, and
Yeah,
that's what
the guy's
happened.
wife was there. He tackled the guy. The
Right.
gun was loose. He got the gun in his tackling. The guy let the
Oh,
gun
the
go, so it's on
Samaritan's
the
wife.
ground.
Gotcha.
It's like in you see it in movies where the hero gets the gun, steps on it, and kicks it away.
Yeah,
Like
right.
she grabbed the gun,
I
and so
didn't realize
she was
that. You're talking
holding
about
it, and then she walked a couple, and she dropped it on the ground.
yeah.
Now I'm thinking that's a loose gun.
My first thought is if I have a jacket, throw it over it. That's my first thought, or get it at least kick it from as far as from the perp as you can. But yeah, like situation. I didn't realize that the guy's wife was with him when he did that.
Yeah.
Plus,
All right,
you're in a
so
crowd too.
it's some interesting stuff on Mike Unleashed, and we'll close out Mike Unleashed with the story with Lenny Dykstra, who the news broke today that Lenny has had a stroke. He lives outside of L.A. somewhere. Well, let's face it, Lenny Dykstra's life has pretty much become a mess with so many incidents, bankruptcy. He was in jail for a while. His life turned out to be a mess, and it was kind of predictable because he was just kind of a loose end. But I have experience with Lenny Dykstra in many different areas. He came in twice to co-host my show when I was on the radio, and then I've heard many other stories about him. And I also interviewed him for a magazine story at his house. So, Darren, I have 4 really good Lenny Dykstra stories. I'm going to just tell one at a time because they're rather lengthy. So, would you like to hear today the Lenny Dykstra interview at his house, where I'm sitting in his living room with him, and he's explaining to me how he really needs to change his diet and regimen? Would you like to hear the story that he told me where he hired a private investigator at a cost of $250,000 to get salacious information on umpires? Would you like to hear the story that he told me the night he had a fight in the batter's box at Dodger Stadium with Dodger catcher, what was the guy's name? I can't remember his name at a time. It'll come to me. Or would you like to hear the night that he caused mayhem in an underground Asian gambling parlor in San Francisco? Which story would you like to hear?
Well, it definitely the underground Asian gambling house. Oh, and partly because I know the umpire story very well. So, but yes,
Okay.
I need to
He
hear
actually
number
broke
4.
that story.
Yeah,
That became a national
on the
story. He
air.
broke it on my show that
Yeah,
he had spent $250,000 on getting dirt on umpires.
yeah.
And I said, "Why would you do that?" And he says, "Dude, when you got information, you know what that does? It shrinks the strike zone."
No, but I got to
All
hear.
right. So
I don't think I've
anyway,
heard the Asian gambling house. So let's go there.
the Asian gambling story is a story where I had a magazine called The Fan Magazine at one point. I was the editor-in-chief and the creator of it. And I had a guy named Bob Clappich who covered the Mets in the heyday of the Mets when Lenny Dykstra was playing with the Mets. And I said, I would love for you to do a story on Lenny and his shenanigans as a Met. And so he wrote a story about one night after the Mets played the Giants. He's in the locker room and he's getting his stuff to do a story. And Lenny calls him over. He goes, "Dude, what are you doing tonight?" He goes, "I don't know, I'm just going back to the hotel, get something to eat." He goes, "No, you're not. You're coming with me." He goes, "What do you mean?" I goes, "Don't worry about it." So he says, "All right." So he files the story. He comes back down. There's Lenny. And they hail a cab. And Lenny takes him to this really seedy area of Chinatown in San Francisco. And they go into this steel door. It's almost like Michael Clayton. If you remember that, like going in, playing
Absolutely
the car.
unmarked door. Yeah, the
Yeah,
guy
right,
behind
unmarked
it.
door. He said they get inside. And he said Lenny darts. He says he lost them, and he said he's walking around now. Clappich says I'm walking around for 2.5, 3 hours trying to find Lenny, and there's all these doors that people are, so he said he said he hears this commotion, this crazy commotion, yelling and screaming. The Asian guys speaking Japanese or whatever they were speaking, and mayhem, tables being, chairs being thrown, the whole bit. And so he wanders over to where the mayhem is. He looks at the door. Lenny had overturned the gambling table and was going to fight all these Asian guys. It's like 4 in the morning. Can't make these stories
It's
up.
par for the course with
This
him.
guy was like the ultimate baseball player who, I don't know. I don't even know how to
He's
describe
Ty
him.
Cobb who didn't murder anyone.
I guess. All right, that'll do it for Mike Unleashed for today. It is now time for a quick 3 questions for Mikey Miss.
3 questions for Mike Miss. Hey, let's go back to your childhood, Mike, for question number 1. What was the Mikey Miss street game of choice?
Oh, I invented a game.
Okay.
I invented a game called ping pong baseball. And the reason why, my older brother, he's older, he's 7 years old. We used to play, we had a ping pong table downstairs, but the ping pong table warped and it was really, you couldn't use it anymore. And so we would take the ping pong balls that we had, and we had a little plastic bat, and we would have a strike zone on the wall, and we'd play baseball with the ping pong ball, throwing it as hard as we could and trying to hit it line drives that wouldn't hit the beams. But I took that game to a higher level. I took it outside. You remember we used to get those little miniature Phillies bats. I collected a bunch of those Phillies bats, and I invented a game called ping pong baseball outside, where I took a plastic golf ball. We put a little bit of tape on it to give it some weight. And the pitcher's mound was at the street level where the sidewalk was. And my front steps was the strike zone. And so you had to hit that ball, pitch it. And you had to hit that ball with the little mini Phillies mini bats. Now, you couldn't get both hands on it, so you had to be really loose with the knob of the bat, and you had to have really good hand-eye coordination to hit that little ball. And to this day, that game that I invented, I used to have people from all over town come to my house to play that game. And there was a big tree in front, like on the other side of the street, that would stop balls, and so it would go in a tree, and you'd have to look at it and catch it, and it would be an out. I would hit left-handed a lot because I could have really been a switch hitter, but the left-handed batter's box, the right-handed was sidewalk that wrapped around to my back steps. The left-handed batter's box was just grass, and I used to get punished all the time, my father, because we would wear out the grass if we were left-handed standing in there. But ping pong baseball was a legendary game. You find anybody my age group in Bristol, they played the game.
Every once in a while, it happens often more than not. We get great stories when I ask these questions. That is a great story. Real fast.
I even made a bat rack in wood shop to accommodate the little miniature bats I used to have. We had to put a handle on it. We took it out. We had like 6 bats in there. You go to the bat rack, and I used cedar wood because I knew cedar wood wouldn't warp.
That is great. We did something similar where we used an aluminum bat and a basketball. We called it bat ball, and you had to bounce the basketball and hit with an aluminum bat. And if you cleared the wires, it was a home run. But yeah, those crazy games are the best. All right, that's question number 1. Question number 2, Mike, it was Valentine's Day this week. What is the most romantic Valentine's date you ever had?
I'm sorry, what was the question? You phased out there.
With Valentine's Day being this week, what is the most romantic Valentine's date or whatever you ever had in your life? Deep down, I know you're a hopeless romantic.
I don't remember anything specific because I've had, unfortunately, a lot of different relationships in my life. But I did do the rose petal thing. I got
in the house, like she walks in.
And she came in, she followed the rose petal track to a tub, to a warm bath, where I kind of I washed her, and then and then a little later I cooked. That was my idea of a good Valentine's Day, when you really put effort into romantic. It like that. Instead of just going out for dinner, Yeah. I can cook, so it was a labor of love for me.
By the way, I think I know. Do I know the person involved with that?
I don't know if you do.
I think I do.
I don't know.
Well, we'll talk off air about it. All right, question number 3. Hey, so for Valentine's Day, we don't do a whole big thing. My wife and I, Maria, she's very down to earth, but we are going to go to dinner this weekend. Give the people who are in a similar situation, give a good restaurant recommendation for dinner this week for a nice Valentine's dinner.
There's so many romantic restaurants you could look at. I would think that you would go online to find, because there's so many new restaurants that have a little romantic slant to them. To me, a smaller Italian restaurant with a nice bottle of wine, and where there's not too much mayhem, to me is really to the ideal a restaurant experience that you should go in. Something that's quaint, something that's maybe 25 to 30 seats at most. And you really get that kind of experience rather than a din of noise.
Yeah, those are the types of restaurants that we like as well. The only problem with that is you got to get a reservation far in advance, because obviously
There used to be the most romantic restaurant in town. It used to be called Astral Plane. And the way it was on Spruce Street. It was an amazingly romantically designed restaurant with all kinds of Victorian things. It's no longer there, but the people that are a little older will remember Astral Plane.
I do remember that, and that is 3 questions from Mikey.
All right, that'll close it down for today. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks again to Steve Spagnuolo for joining the Mike Missanelli podcast. As we're kind of like in a dead season now. We're waiting for something to happen baseball-wise. The early stages aren't exciting at all. And then the Sixers, we want to get this regular season to limp to the finish to see what they're going to be in the playoffs. So we're kind of in limbo. So we may have to go into some other wild topics next week. I'll have another Lenny Dykstra story for you. In the meantime, you can get in touch with me, Mike at MikeMiss.com. You can check me out on Twitter, MikeMiss25. And speaking of romantic, if you want to take a trip down to the winery called Natali Vineyards in Cape May Courthouse, go down there and share a bottle of red amongst the vines. It starts to get a little warmer. You sit outside. We've got the tables. We've got our propane fire tables that you can sit there and get romantic with and share a day bottle of wine. It's a beautiful thing. And have our crudités that we have there. And also, if you want a cameo shout out, I was willing to give you the love messages for Valentine's Day. So if you want to take advantage of that, you didn't do anything for Valentine's Day, you want to send her a little love message, go to cameo.com and look up Mike Missanelli, and I'll give you a personal shout out. All right, I think that's about it for today. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week on the Mike Missanelli podcast, brought to you by BetRivers. See you, everybody.